All right, the recording has started. All right, well, thanks you guys for being here. Tonight we are talking about escapes, which sounds not fun, but it's actually kind of fascinating to learn about. So, I actually had more. Okay, and once we get going and start talking, I know Annie knows this, but Susan, I minimize the panel that shows the participants because when it's up, as you can see, then you can't see the whole screen. So because of that, if you have a question, just jump off mute and shout it out, because if you try to wave or get my attention, it isn't going to work. But we do want them to be as interactive as possible because, for one thing, it's more fun and it's better learning, but also the webinars are here not only to present information, but to help us all learn from each other and share best practices. So we do want people to jump in with what they know, whether it was going to be in the webinar or not. If we all know what the other people know, that's part of what the value of the webinars is. So with that said, let's jump right in. The first thing we're going to do is watch a video of dog escapes. It made me cringe. I almost didn't show it because what they're encouraging these dogs to do is so freaking dangerous. But it really shows us interesting information about how little space dogs need to escape. So I think it is worth watching, even though I don't condone what they did to make it. Oh, he's gonna blow out an ACL. Yep, that was a medium-sized dog. Okay, so besides the fact that those dogs are lucky to be alive, what else struck you about the video? For me, the biggest thing is how little space they need, and that's almost always what happens with escapes is they get out a small hole in the fence or a small space where the person just never dreamed a dog that big could fit through such a small size. They sort of defy the laws of physics with how they can move their bodies and sneak out. The next question is, why do dogs escape? I mean, we're nice people, we're great people, we're underdog volunteers, and our dogs are cool, and our houses are nice. Why would a dog want to run away? Any guesses?
Well, ours a lot of times because they're just scared.
Fear and anxiety is pretty much the #1 reason, at least with the underdog population, that we will see that they're in fight or flight. So sometimes when they see an option for flight, they just take it. Other reasons. This picture is a hint, by the way, to one of them. And if you get it, you're a nerd.
Separation anxiety?
That can be. I would put that still under the anxiety category.
They're bored.
Yep, that is the #2, boredom and isolation. Dogs need an extraordinary amount of stimulation and exercise, some of them, and if you don't get it for them, they will figure out how to do it on their own. Many ways, and running away is one of them. They get to stretch their legs, get to have some fun, smell some new things, and there's one more. Do you guys remember this movie? Do you remember what this dog screams all the time?
Squirrel.
Squirrel. Good job. Predation is the other one. Sometimes they see something moving, they chase after it, and by the time the chase is done, they're gone and they forget how they even got there because they kind of their brain kind of flips into that predatory mode. Those are the main reasons that it happens. And it happens, anyone that's been doing rescue or dog care for long enough or had their own dogs has probably dealt with it at some point. It happens to almost everyone. But we can learn some stuff to try to lessen the impact. When do the escapes usually happen?
When you least expect it.
Yep. All right. The picture is a hint. When's one time?
Transferring from car to house, from house to car.
Yep. Transports is one of them. What else? This picture is also a hint. On walks, especially if you're letting a child walk them, but even with adults, they can slip out of harnesses and collars. Again, that's often where the predation or the fear and anxiety will come in, and they'll get away from you. This picture is also a hint. When they're unattended in the yard, they can slip under or over the fence more easily than you would think. So, and that can be, even though we think our yards are so interesting, dogs need novel experiences and novel stimulus all the time. So even if it's a cool yard, they can get bored in there and go off to seek adventure other places. What's another one? These pictures are a hint for another time. It happens a lot.
Oh, the door.
Deliveries.
Yep, the door. Yep, the doors. And why did I use these two pictures? Is it probably going to be you that lets the dog out the door? Doubtful. You might, but probably, usually it's children or delivery people that do not understand the urgency of managing the doors, or their friends don't.
Yep, or gates. Yeah.
Yes, yep. This one, I didn't do a picture because it would give it away, but there are 2 nights out of the year that are the number 1 and number 2 nights for dog escapes. Any guesses what they are?
4th of July.
July.
4th of July for sure is one of them. There's one other one.
I've got a lot of dogs in dog parks on Thanksgiving Day. When there's too many family members in and out without paying attention to the dog.
That's a good guess. It's not the number 2 night statistically.
New Year's.
Nope.
Storms.
Nope. Any more guesses? Halloween. Which it's, for one thing, the door is just opening and closing a lot, so that's part of it. But also, dogs don't understand removable parts. They don't understand Halloween costumes. All of the things that we understand, they do not. In their mind, it truly is monsters coming through the door, even though we know it's just Elsa or whatever. And then, so they're getting scared, they're there, the door keeps opening, these monsters keep coming, so they hatch their plan. The next time the door opens, they dart, they get out into the street, and it is filled with monsters! And they just start to run. And it can be hard to get them back. So those are the two nights of the year. So what we're here to talk about tonight then is, how do we prevent escapes? You're never gonna 100% prevent them, but you can prevent a lot of them through 2 ways. One is training, the other one is taking precautions. As far as training, how I look at it is, if you had a football team that hadn't trained all season and then they popped them in the Super Bowl, would you expect that team to do very well? Of course not. They would get clobbered by the team that had been training. Escapes are like the Super Bowl. It's super high stakes. It's super challenging. It's the height of everything. If you haven't been training for it, of course it's not going to go well. So one thing that really, really helps is if you do some training for escape situations. What is the very, very, very first thing that you should train a dog on to prevent escapes? Any guesses?
Recall?
That's a good guess, and it's on the list, but it's not the first thing.
A good stay.
Also on the list, but not the first thing. The very first thing, and this gets missed by everyone, that's why I always use it, both in private training and webinars, the first thing that you have to teach your dog, is their name. And most dogs know their name, and if they're interested enough and you say it lively enough, they'll look at you. You need to train your dog so when they hear their name, their head spins to you every single time, no matter what the distraction, no matter what else is going on. Because if you can get a dog to look at you, there is a 90% chance they will do whatever you say next. If you cannot get the dog to look at you, there is almost no chance they will do whatever you say next. So in the case of a recall where maybe it's a squirrel or they're really scared or there's something really exciting that they just have to have, that is super, super, super high distraction. And if you try to recall the dog or do anything else, if they're not looking at you, it isn't going to work. So you need to build a name command that works so well, it works every time. Now that was pretty easy. That was just in our yard, but that's what you should see every time is the head spinning. How do you do that? How do you train the dog on their name?
If you can, feed them by hand.
Yep,
It's hard with a lot of these underdogs because someone won't eat unless, in the middle of the night when you're not there, but.
Right. Yep. The easiest way, if you can do it, is just kibble after kibble. Say, Zeta. And at first, you don't even need to ask them to look at you. You can just say the name and give them the food, whether they look or not. So they start to have the association. And once you've done it enough times, they'll start to look at you and then only feed them when they look at you. And it really just is about repetition, repetition, repetition. So it's a good one if there's kids in the home or other people. If it's too boring for you, it's a good job to delegate. So yep, that is the best way if you can do it, is do hand feeding and just say their name as you give them kibble by kibble. What are some other ways if the dog won't take food from your hand or won't eat while you're watching? Yeah, it's hard. Sometimes you have to give them time until they will take food from you, but sometimes they'll take something tastier than food, like squeezed cheese. If you put a little dab of squeezed cheese on your finger, or peanut butter, sometimes trying something higher value than their kibble will work. If they're so shell-shocked that they're not interested in toys, they're not interested in food, they're not interested in anything, then they aren't ready to be trained yet. And you need to give them more time to decompress and settle in. But eventually, once you find something they like, using that to teach them their name is the way to go. And once you can get your dog to that step one of the training, it's easy. Usually it just takes a lot of repetition, but getting the dog to look at you is so key in preventing escapes and in all other behavior and training. The next thing, somebody already guessed it. After you have a dog that will look at you, the next thing to train them on is a recall. When you recall them, say their name first. Again, you've got to get them oriented. You've got to get them to commit. And you do that by saying their name and getting them to look at you. Then give your next cue. In this case, you can use a special word, or even if you just train them with come, doesn't matter. But whatever word you use, whether it's come or here or treat or whatever, do you ever say it and when the dog gets there, start cutting the dog's nails or putting the dog in a crate and leaving for 8 hours? No. Only wonderful, special, amazing, happy things happen when you say your recall word. We'll just say come. And the next thing is when you're training the dog, again, we're training for the Super Bowl, you move the direction you want your dog to go. What happens a lot is when people are doing a recall, they go like this. If you're putting your shoulders forward and looking at the dog, that is dog language for go the other way. So you'll see that sometimes where the dog is taken off, they say the dog's name, the dog turns and looks at them, and then they go like this. And the dog does what they just told them in dog language to do. Take off and go the other way, or at least stay. So it's really important to move the direction you want your dog to go when you're doing your recall training. So it's pretty easy, but even just doing that much, have a kid or someone in the house do that a number of times every day. You're building training and practice towards preventing an escape just by teaching the dog a recall and to follow you, even if you're in the house in a low distraction environment. You're still building that habit. There's a lot more to recall training. That's kind of a different webinar in and of itself. But even if you just do the name game and that much, you will take great strides in reducing the likelihood of an escape. The third training, somebody already guessed it, so we won't say it again. Oh, I forgot to tell you one thing. If it's a real emergency, if the dog truly escapes and you're desperate, call their name. If you lay down flat, I call it the call drop move, 99% of the time, the dog will run over and see what happened. So it's a desperate move. I guarantee you your snarkiest neighbor will be right there watching, but it will probably get the dog to come back. So if you have to, call their name and then drop. They just, even if they don't want to, they can't resist. So that can be a move to have in your back pocket in the event of an emergency. Yep, the next one, we talked about the person that guessed said stay. I actually say wait. And people train their dog to wait for things like getting their food, but you want to train them to wait at every doorway. This does two things. One, it greatly reduces door darting to begin with, so they're less likely to take off. And two, it builds self-control, which helps in and of itself will help reduce anxiety and reduce the likelihood that they're just going to take off after something. So in this, and it's just like a child to think they should answer the door holding the dog. Uh-oh, come on. So I'll just put my dog down and open the door. But if your dog is trained to wait, then the door will open and they won't go. So that is the end result of what we're looking for with our recall training for wait. Even though we kind of obviously just staged that one with me and my kids in Zeta to show you. The first thing when you're teaching a dog to wait, the very first thing you have to have is a release word. Dogs get really confused, and I see this all the time, where it holds up the training because the dog doesn't know when they can stop. So using a word like okay or free, but one word that everyone in the house uses exclusively to mean you're done waiting, you can go, is very key. Remember, a dog doesn't know that okay and all right and okie doke, and we could probably think of 20 words off the top of our head that mean okay. A dog can't. So you have to use the exact same word every time, and everyone in the house does. Your training will just go so much better and be so much easier on your dog. So that's step one of teaching a wait, is having your release word. Then there's a million ways to teach wait. Like if we asked every participant here, how do you normally teach it? They likely would each say something different. I'm just going to show you the way I do it because I'm very lazy and it's fast and easy and gives you a lot of chances to practice. And it's very specific for the dog for door waiting. Because again, if you're teaching them to wait before they dive in and take their food, they won't necessarily translate that to waiting at a door. We know that wait means wait, but dogs are very situational. So to teach them to wait, I usually put them behind some sort of a barrier, slowly open the door, and release them, and they can go out. That's why the release word is so key, because we don't want them to move until they hear it. And if you use a different word every time, they're going to guess and they might break before you need them to. So pretty much place them behind the barrier, they create the door. You can do this in the bathroom. If your dog comes in there with you, anytime you're going through the door, say wait in a low, firm tone, and slowly open the door. And the dog, especially the first time, their nose will follow the movement, and they'll go right to it. That's called breaking. They're breaking the wait. Close the door again. Very simple. Then slowly open it, say wait again, slowly open the door. And when you see that first moment of self-control, use your release word, okay, and let them out. And then just build up to longer and longer times of waiting. But do it at every door, every time. It will just greatly decrease the chance that your dog will door dart, and greatly increase the chance that they will come back if they do. So that is the main training that we do for escapes for when they happen. Any questions about that?
No, good.
No, okay. The next thing is barriers. Besides training, we just have to do some physical things to keep our dogs from escaping. Gates, crates, and leashes are the main barriers that we use. And really the rule, anytime you have a new or unfamiliar dog in your house, or an anxious dog, or a dog that is known to be an escape artist, is always maintain 2 barriers between your dog and the open world. You can see in this picture, what I do is just put up an X pen around the door, so that besides the door to the open world, there's a second one. There's the X pen. But we want to maintain that at all times. If we look out, what's happening in the first picture here, the one without the dogs in it? There's 2 barriers, there's 2 gates, but one of them is open. So that's what's wrong with that picture. What about the second picture? What do you see? Let's see, we've got a fence, we've got barrier 1. And this is a long line. The dog, besides the fence, is also on a long line. That's the second barrier in that case. I did later learn this dog can climb fences, so I was very glad that we'd had the second barrier. And if you look at the second small dog in the picture, she doesn't really have a second barrier because she's my own dog. She's not a foster, and she's not an escape artist. But if it's a small dog, even though that fence looks pretty sturdy, they can find ways to get through. So I would still use a long line if you think the dog might try to get out. And in the yard, if you're not sure, have them stay out there with them.
I have one right now that does a few quick digs under the fence. And out she goes.
Oh my gosh.
She actually came to me because she did the door dash.
Okay.
Ran away, and then I got her. And she didn't do it for a week. Maybe she was too scared to.
Sure.
And now I think she trusts me enough, so she's either on a long line or she's tied to my deck.
Right. Yeah.
In a fenced yard.
What's that?
In a fenced yard.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, 2 barriers at least for that one.
Yeah, and she's starting. I think she's pretty trustworthy now. But
oh, that's great.
My bigger concern is she's not adopted yet, and that worries me.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a handle on her, but it's going to be that transition that she goes through.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, how are you planning to prepare the people when they go through that transition?
Well, I can explain to them what I did, and sometimes I think maybe not having a fence and having her be on a leash all the time is what she needs, and like, but that's still dangerous because one drop of the leash, even though she's knows her name, she's got an emergency recall, but yeah, and she was an owner surrender who apparently always escaped.
Oh, yeah. With those ones, you almost just have to, as long as you've had them, treat them like an escape artist, and she's probably always going to need multiple barriers, but that is a hard one for adopting.
Yeah, they'll just have to take it very seriously or they can't have her.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, the next barrier, leashes are also a barrier, and using a double leash. Normally, if you're walking a dog, it should always be on a harness. Collars aren't really good for their neck, and especially on small dogs, they can get collapsed tracheas pretty easily. But a collar can be a useful place to stick a backup leash if you're double leashing them, because some of them, I see this all the time in private clients where they've just adopted the dog. They come meet me for training. The dog is in a harness, and in like one slick move, the dog pops out and is free. And I'm like, that's probably what happened before. But some of them are really good at getting out of collars and harnesses. So having a backup is really important. This style of collar, you can see it kind of comes together, and it usually has another piece of cloth or a chain so that the collar will pull tight. That's called a martingale. They use them on whippets and sight hounds a lot because they have those tiny little heads. So it will, if the dog pulls on it, it won't pull like a choke chain and continue to asphyxiate them, but it will pull snug so that they can't back their head through. So it is quite a bit safer than a regular collar. So double leashing is another way to have our golden rule of 2 barriers between the dog and the outside world. What's happening in this picture? How many barriers does that dog have? In the one where she's making the wrong choice?
None.
None. Maybe a half at best. But yeah, when you're transporting a dog, it's really dangerous to have them loose in the car. They can distract you or jump. It can cause an accident. And it's very unsafe in terms of escaping because you don't have the 2 barriers between the dog and the open world.
I just had this happen too with a foster that I had, a collie.
Okay.
Got adopted. I had told the owners that the only thing I have not been able to get him to do is jump up, which is for puppy mill dogs, you know.
Right. They've never had to jump in a cage.
Right. He'll jump down off something, but not up, like up on a bed or up into the car. And, and so he took him home, and they got a block from home, and his window was just like the one you showed, halfway down. And he jumped out of the car window.
Oh my gosh.
One.
Oh.
But fortunately, usually every dog in my house gets sangria for an emergency recall, but because he was a collie, he got Timmy's in the well.
That's awesome.
And the owner's like, Timmy's in the well. He turned around, came right back.
Oh, that is brilliant. I love that.
But he's like, you told me he didn't jump up. I'm like, well, that's kind of down.
I would call that down. And in any case, you didn't have your 2 barriers, sir, but thank goodness for the emergency recall. That's the thing. It's got to be a combination of training and precautions. Otherwise, that poor dog, who knows what would have happened.
Yeah.
I love the idea of picking a fun recall word that, so you use sangria unless there's something clever for the breed. Does anybody else do fun recall? Jen, do you know what she's talking about with a recall word? You can train your dog to have an emergency recall word. So come or here is your regular recall word, but you can use another word like Amy does, sangria, and she says that and gives them like a hot dog or wildly amazing food. So the dog jumps and races over every time they hear it.
Yeah, the neighbors think I'm an alcoholic, and so are the dogs, but.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that.
They're barking like a person in another yard or a dog in another yard, and they're just barking away. they know their names. I'll tell them to come. They'll look at me and like, I don't think so. And I say sangria, and you've got like 5 dogs running up in the house with bam.
Oh my gosh, you have to video that and post it to the page.
I have actually.
Yeah. Oh, have you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. So transporting. Now what about if, despite all of our best efforts, the dog still escapes? We're just gonna look. The first thing you've got to do is mobilize. Text 911 dog escape to Shannon and Emily. And then, that was not supposed to happen. My hot link didn't work. Bear with me a second. Shoot. Hold on. Sorry about that. Okay. I'm just going to use the training that's already in here because it's very complete, and this is what everyone is used to seeing and what you can show potential adopters. But has everyone seen this guide, the general Underdog foster training guide?
Yes.
I have, but I can't find it anymore. I don't know how to access it.
Should we repost it like to the Facebook page maybe?
Yeah.
That would be helpful.
I was actually just waiting for you to go through it, Anne, and before I reposted it.
Oh, okay. I am almost done with that, so it won't be long. But
Do new fosters usually get like an email with this information?
Yeah, it should come, you fill out the application for a new foster and you get the home visit, and then I think Emily is still sending out the like, congratulations, you're ready to foster, here's the training thing, and here's how you foster.
Yeah, because I remember seeing it, but now I can't find it in anything. So I'd appreciate a repost if that's available. That'd be great.
And I think Amy and Anne and Emily are redoing it, last I heard, because there's been a lot of changes since COVID.
Oh, okay.
yeah.
They're semi-minor, like events are all on hold, and basically the processes around no contact with COVID, but it's just a page. Usually when you can't find it though, on the Facebook page, off to the side, there's files, and there's the most current one is always in there, which is not the one that Anne's showing right now. But that'll be reposted soon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So if you do escape, the first thing is notify Shannon and Emily right away. Text as you're running. If you can keep the dog in your eyesight, do it. If they get out of your eyesight, put food in a scent article where you saw them last, because again, they're probably in fight or flight or something happened, but a switch flipped in their brain. If you put something strong smelling, it can help them find their way back. Drive around and look for them, talk to your neighbors. If you have a neighborhood Facebook group, put it up on there or next door or Craigslist, and let the police know. And at the same time, Underdog will be mobilizing on their side, asking for help to look for the dog. And they may engage a group called the Retrievers. The Retrievers is a kind of an independent group. They help all different rescue groups, but they're really good at catching escaped dogs. They have their act together. It's kind of amazing. They practically march in formation. But they will get that going. If after 4 hours the dog isn't back, getting signs from the Underdog volunteers, posting the signs, going door to door with the signs, and again, really leveraging social media as much as you can, but getting the signs up everywhere is the next step. And if there's a sighting, go to where the sighting is and bring something really, really smelly. It's a great idea to bring another dog if you have one, especially that dog likes. They're much more likely to approach the other dog than they are you. And the other dog may bring them a sense of calm, which will help. And remaining calm, it's so hard because it is really scary when a dog escapes. You don't know if they're going to come back, if they're going to get hurt, if they're going to cause a car accident. You are going to be in fight or flight in a big way if it happens. But taking deep breaths, trying to calm yourself down is going to be very key, because the dog is already scared. And if you are scared, it's not going to come near you because it thinks there's a threat there. Not chasing the dog is one of the hugest keys, and usually they probably put that on the signs too. If you chase, the dog will run the other way. Even a not scared dog will run if you chase it, let alone a frightened one. So making sure you use the right body language to draw them in, staying crouched down, talking to them calmly, slowly getting the slip lead on them. If the dog flees, then bring food back the next day. If you can keep them in that area and keep them coming back for the food, sooner or later you will be able to catch it. So all of that is in the guide. Does anybody have any questions about the training or the prevention or the underdog policies if it does happen?
I can say usually when it does happen, which unfortunately it happens much more than we would like, that oftentimes on the volunteer page, there's usually a thread and somebody's announcing it. And that way somebody can set up a group messaging piece, and somebody else that maybe lives nearby there can get the next door apps and all the local things. So
right,
it becomes a group effort.
Right. Yep. Yeah, you guys have really good policies for mobilizing and having somebody do the social media. If it's your dog and you're the one in that position, the more you can keep your eyes on them, the better. The further they get, the harder it's going to be. When it happens, you said it's more often than you would like. What are usually the circumstances?
I think probably the number one way is the slip out the door.
Mm-hmm.
That one seems to happen the most.
Okay.
Otherwise, I guess we've certainly had some that'll go over or under a fence.
Yeah.
But I think the door is the most common one.
Mainly the door darting?
Yeah.
The door darting, and I think the leash escaping, like that they're not double leash, they've slipped out of their collar.
Okay.
And then they're gone.
Yeah. All right. Well, so anyone watching or learning from this, double leash. When in doubt, double leash. And I know that people don't put that second barrier up on the door because it's clumsy. It looks like clutter. It is annoying. But really, compared with an escape, it's a good precaution. And there's a lot of products on the market these days that you can get to block the doorways, so the dog always has that 2 barriers between itself and the outside world. Okay, other questions or thoughts or anything? Michelle.
I have a question. So it's not even a rescue dog. He is rescued, but it's a resident dog, not our foster. He's setting a bad example. But so he jumps our fence. We have a second leash to make sure he doesn't do that. But when we're out there, we like to have him without it. Obviously, sometimes he sneaks out and escapes. My question is recall. He is one we have not found a good recall. He always does come back. He kind of neighborhood and then he shows up.
Okay.
But that's our problem we've been having is just how do you get to a point where he will hear you?
Right. Okay. What kind of dog is he?
He's a terrier mix.
Okay.
That's a lot of broadness there.
That's okay.
They told us he was a lab min pin. but he's not. I
He's a
could
terrier?
he's definitely terrier. He looks like a Papillon. He's
Okay.
pounds, but he can scale a 4-foot fence.
Wow. And how old is he?
5.
Okay. It sounds really like he, and I know you're probably giving him a lot. I don't mean this in any way of a negative way, but no matter how much exercise and stimulation you're giving him, it's not enough. And I hate saying that to people because it's everyone's always doing everything they can. But terriers are kind of notorious for everything you've just said. They're bred to work independently, so they're not as interested in learning the recall. It can still be done, but it is more work. Their brains are going a million miles an hour all the time. I mean, they're bred to work in tight spaces with creatures almost as big as themselves and fight them. It'd be sort of like if you or I decided to go to North Minneapolis and fight crime all by ourselves. You know, it takes a certain personality type.
Yeah.
So finding breed specific enrichment for him, like if you have a place he can dig in the yard where you can hide things for him to dig up.
He chases the rabbits. He's caught a few rabbits, and they're about the same size as he is. So I'm just shocked. But
no, that's a terrier though. They're supposed to fight things about the same size as them. But anything you can do to give him more exercise and breed specific enrichment will probably help. Is he food motivated?
Yes.
Yeah, that's where I would start with the recall. The challenge is start in the house where he will hear you or wherever he will hear you, and start with the name game. Even though people always feel like, oh, he totally knows his name, we don't have to do that. You will build a more reliable recall if you spend a week and what's his name?
Herbie.
Hand feeding.
Yeah.
Herbie, feed. Herbie, feed. Over and over again. And for him, for him, maybe use something higher value like turkey or something so that he's so cute. Oh my goodness, you're adorable.
Yeah, he came over when you said Kirby. So he knows his name, and he's very motivated. He's really good in the house. Yeah.
Well, trust me, do it in the house very intentionally for a week where you do the name food.
Don't just
then move out to the yard, but do it after he's played a little bit so that's still a fairly low distraction environment. Do it for a week out there. Then do it as soon as he goes outside. It's a slightly more distraction because it's a more novel environment. But really, even though he can do it pretty well in a low distraction environment, if he's totally like, see ya, wouldn't want to be you once he goes, combine increasing the stimulation and exercise and enrichment with going back to square one with the name game and the recall. And building it up. And the other thing you can do once you start to do the recall work is do it when he's on the long line. And if he says, once you say, Herbie, and he looks at you, mark with your reinforcement marker right as he looks. Do it when he commits, not when he comes.
Okay.
If he hears that marker, usually they'll come the rest of the way. And then if you keep a long line on him to really make sure he complies.
Yeah.
The 3 things that I would recommend.
Okay. I'll try that.
Thank you.
Good
luck. Yep. And keep checking in. Let us know how it goes.
Yes.
Yes. He is
Our foster's doing great, by the way. She stays right next to us.
Awesome.
With that. So.
That's fantastic. Okay, any more questions? All right, then that is what we've got for tonight. This will get posted to the Facebook page so you can show it to adopters when they adopt the dog if you want to try to reduce the risk of escaping or train new volunteers or just review it again yourself. All right, thanks everybody. Bye.
Bye, thank you.